Hi, I'm Kels, and I completely fell out of love with life. Where do we start? Let me give you some context as to who I am, why I'm here, what we want to do here, and that's it. That's probably all the information you need for now. As I say, I'm Kels. I'm here because I completely fell out of love with life and landed myself in hospital. And this is hopefully the beginning of a journey to find myself, re-find life, re-find who I used to be, who I could be, who I want to be, any sort of semblance of being in myself and in the world, and maybe some happiness along the way. So, also, fun fact, I recorded this whole thing but didn't turn on the mic. So, this is actually the second time doing this. Live and learn. I'm an actor, that's my thing, that's what I do. I'm also a writer. I'm also someone who does a lot of art as well. Always have. Art has been a big part of my identity for my whole life, and that's another thing that we're going to be trying to heal on this journey. I also am a chronic illness girly. Hands up and hello to all of my chronic illness girlies out there. I see you, I feel for you, buckle up, we're in this together. And that's another thing that ended up landing me in the hospital because I was first diagnosed with my first chronic illness, fibromyalgia, when I was 15, long time ago now. And that was way before COVID or anything like that. And really before sort of there was much understanding or sympathy or compassion or any sort of real care towards chronic illnesses in general. So I really didn't have much support. My family obviously tried their best and have been amazing, but I just basically was sort of lumped with this diagnosis and this new experience of how my life was going straight into my GCSEs. And the only thing I knew how to do was to just pull my socks up, soldier on, and get on with it, because what else do you do? We live in a society, that it worked externally. Sure, I got my GCSEs, I got my A levels, I went to uni, I got a BA, and then I went on and did a master's. I went to drama school, did acting, and graduated from there, and then have been an actor for the last 5-6 years. COVID happened also, we all are aware, and now we're here. Externally, soldiering on worked. In order to do that, I was berating myself, beating myself up, just absolutely giving myself hell inside my brain. Anytime I felt like I was lacking or struggling to keep up or not doing something perfectly, not steaming ahead, just completely beating myself up and berating myself and telling myself that I was kind of the worst human ever, basically. So really, really good stuff happening in the brain and really, really sustainable, as you can imagine. Cut to the last 2 years of my life and wheels start falling off. My mental health has just taken a turn for the worst. I completely lost myself. I became a complete shell of who I ever knew myself to be. I experienced valleys and deep corners of depression that I have never personally experienced before. And really, it became quite bad. For want of a better word, it was bad. I was trying to keep my head above the water. I was trying to stay afloat, telling, certain people in my close circles what was going on with me, but for the most part, keeping it away from people because, again, I've just never functioned in any other way. And society, unfortunately, especially Western society, sort of applauds us for soldiering on and working ourselves to the bone. But if we're still going, it's good, well done. And so I just really, it didn't actually occur to me to try and slow down and try to be kind to myself and try a different way of functioning. I just sort of kept treading water and kept getting more and more depressed. It got very, very dire. Something was going to give. And it ended up that actually my health ended up giving. So about 4 weeks ago now, my health took a turn, wasn't getting any better. So I thought, okay, if it's not better on Monday, then I'll go to the GP. Didn't get to Monday. By Sunday, we were calling 111. I had an out of hours GP appointment. He prescribed me antibiotics for what he thought was cystitis. Wasn't cystitis. I was then in A&E on the Tuesday, with it being so much worse, was discharged from A&E early hours of Wednesday morning with different antibiotics, and by Friday I was back in A&E again, and my infection count had tripled, and we were bordering on sepsis. So they admitted me, and I ended up being in hospital for 10 days before they released me. And I was ill in ways I have never before been ill in my life. I got out of hospital almost 2 weeks ago now, doing better every day. As you can see, I'm here, I'm sat, I'm alive. And the last 2 weeks have essentially just been, well, the first week was I was still sort of a shell of myself, but then we've slowly become human again, and now we're resting and recovering properly. But during that time, I have been forced to rest and do absolutely nothing else but rest and recover. And in that time, it made me think, maybe something wasn't working for me. Maybe something wasn't working for me. And maybe we ought to kind of take a little look at our technique at life and perhaps shuffle things around a little bit so we don't land ourselves in hospital again, and we don't go another 2 years being so severely depressed, because that was also not sustainable. That leads us to here, where I am now. I take such great comfort in watching other girlies on the YouTubes, my book talk girlies, my life vlog girlies, my slow living girlies, my hobby girlies, just going about their little vlogs, weekly, daily, whatever, talking about the books they're reading, doing their little hobbies, doing their art, going to get coffee, going for a walk, and sharing it with the internet. I have been living for that. It is so healing. It is such a nurturing little space, and I love everything that it stands for. So I figured, why don't I try that? I've got quite a journey ahead of me in terms of trying to reevaluate entirely how I approach being a human and living life. And so I'm going to do it by romanticizing it through vlogs, question mark, because that feels to me right now like a nice, fun way of doing it for some reason. So I'm going to follow that instinct, and I'm not going to overthink it. I feel like I want to do it, so that's what we're going to do. So going forwards, this vlog will end up being actually a reading vlog. I want to do vlogs about reading books. I'll vlog about acting because that's obviously a huge part of my life. I'll take you to work with me. I'll take you to auditions. I'll give you little sneaky peeks behind the scenes, self-tape setups, whatever. Bring you along on that journey because she's a roller coaster in and of herself. And maybe we'll do some art as well. I've been gently trying to reconnect myself and re-nurture my love of art over the last year or two. Here and there, I've done some bits and bobs, but that's gonna be a long game kind of sitch, the reconnecting to the art thing, because I so deeply fell out with it because I just put so much pressure on myself to make everything perfect and for everything to be some sort of way of monetizing or career backup, or I don't even know. It just became so clouded in pressure, and I completely lost sight of the reason why little Kels picked up a paintbrush in the first place, why little 6-year-old Kels gravitated towards that and never looked back. I used to have this feeling when I did art of this vivacity and energy for life and for creating and setting about making a thing and then having it done and being like, I did that, and it had such an aliveness to it. And that just disappeared somewhere along the line, and I don't know where it went, and I don't know when it went, but it did, and everything became grey, and everything became sad. And I want to reconnect with my love of art and the actual act of doing it rather than trying to produce some sort of product. That was what it changed into, I think, at the crux of it. So there will be art as well, tentatively so, there will be art. And we're just going to gently try and go along. I actually had also intended to mention the poetry of Mary Oliver, who I feel like is floating around this particular corner of the internet a lot, quite rightly so. In Mary Oliver we trust. So some of you may have already heard of her and know where I'm going with this, but if you haven't, welcome to this introduction of Mary Oliver. There's 2 poems from her that feel incredibly apt to what I've been talking about. The first is Wild Geese, as again, some of you probably can predict. And so I'm going to read that for you now. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. Just a little reminder that you belong in the world. Simple as. So that one I love, and then there's another one, you have a life. Look and look again. The world is not just a little thrill for the eyes. It's more than bones. It's more than the delicate wrist with its personal pulse. It's more than the beating of the single heart. It's praising. It's giving until the giving feels like receiving. You have a life. Just imagine that. You have this day, and maybe another, and maybe still another. I have no idea what this next sort of chapter of my life is going to bring, but the only thing that I do know is that it can't be the same as what the previous chapter was, because that was so dire. So welcome. If you would like to join and stay for the journey, pull up a chair, buckle up. You're so welcome here. If you're on a journey yourself of trying to re-find yourself and connect to yourself and to life in this absolutely chaotic, terrifying sometimes world that we live in, join. You're so welcome. Let's hold hands and go on this journey together, because woo, yeah, we got some way to travel. So turning now to what this vlog is going to be, the rest of the vlog. Basically, it's been the last 2 weeks of me resting and recovering since getting home from the hospital, which has meant, as I said, I had literally nothing to do apart from sit and read. Oh my god. Sorry. Have you guys heard of Moby Dick? I don't know. He's kind of an indie writer, this Herman Melville. You might not have heard of him, but I think he's got promise. This book has blown my mind. This book has completely blown my mind apart. It's absolutely incredible. I have so many thoughts. I'm not going to get into them now because that's coming later in the vlog. But oh my god, it's incredible. I have torn this book to shreds. I can't wait to actually succinctly, hopefully, probably not, let's be real, share all of my thoughts with you about it. Look at all of those markers. Look at all of that. And on that note, I think that's everything. I think I've given you enough context of who I am, why we're here, where we're going. And let's give this a go. Cheers, thank you, and welcome. If you have indeed sat yourself with me in this little lifeboat, to the rest of the vlog, and I'll talk to you when I have thoughts on Moby Dick. Okay, bye. The little hoverfly, don't know if you could see that. Coffee acquired. I was able to walk into the village on my own, and didn't feel too faint, so we're doing well. And I feel like I'm slowly coming back to my body, so that's good. I just moved spots because the sun was chasing me, and I am a dedicated shade dweller. I am going to continue reading for a while and finish my coffee, keep reading. So far so good today. Hello. Hello. Oh my. Hello. Hi. Hi, girl. I have just reached the last 3 chapters, and they have officially spotted Moby Dick. I'm feeling quite sad for Captain Ahab at this point. Up until this point, he's been slightly tyrannical, but just slightly in his madness. So I hadn't necessarily felt sorry for him at this point, up to this point, as much as just really fascinated by him. But I'm now feeling really sorry for him. There was one moment that sort of tipped me over the edge in feeling sorry for him. He hoisted himself, or requested to be hoisted up the main mast to be able to be on the lookout himself, because he didn't really believe that anyone else was properly looking for Moby Dick. And while he was up there, a large seabird came and aggressively stole his hat and flew away with it and then dropped it into the sea. And I don't know why that image, for me, just really made me feel quite sad for him. I felt it was so pitiful. This man who sort of carries himself with so much power and status in the ship, and really no one can go up against him. It was just such a sad, pitiful moment. And then the chapter previous to the one that I'd just gotten to before they spotted Moby Dick, it describes this really, really calm, serene day, and Ahab, up until this point, has been continuously tormented by his one monomaniacal thought of catching this whale, and really doesn't seem to be able to deviate away from it or see the woods from the trees, or really just have any sort of objective distanced view on the matter. For the first time, for some reason on this day, he's sort of gazing into the sea and he starts weeping, because he suddenly wonders what exactly it is that's controlling him and making him do this. It's almost as if it's something other than himself, and he sort of ponders to Starbuck whether it's God or whether it's insanity, or some other outside force. But it's the first time that he considers again the effect of it on the crew and on Starbuck. Starbuck has a wife and child at home, as do probably many of the crew on board of the ship. There's like 30 men on this ship. And up until this point, Ahab has been like, I'm going down with the ship. You're going down with the ship. We're all going down with the ship to get this whale. Okay? Okay, I'm glad we're all agreed. And for the first time, he turns to Starbuck and he's like, when I lower to go and get this whale, don't join me. This is my mission alone, and you shouldn't have to die on behalf of my mission because you have a wife and child at home. I also have a wife and child at home, but it's this one little moment where he actually sort of has a shred of human um, logic and conscience in amongst his madness. Starbuck is then like, bro, no. Like, oh my god, you're finally thinking clearly. Let's all go home. Screw this whale. Like, it's fine. Why don't we all just go home? Like, I'm so glad you're finally seeing it this way. You get it, you understand. Like, let's just go home and forget this whole thing and it'll all be okay. And Ahab just can't do it. So now, going into the final meeting with Moby Dick, I'm suddenly feeling sadness for Ahab. Still absolutely team whale, team Moby Dick to the end. But perhaps now if Ahab gets eaten by him or something, I'll feel a little sadness for him. Because some sort of soft human flesh just managed to crack through the skull of his madness. So there we go. Let's see what these last 3 chapters hold. It's not going well. He'd been in the sea in his boat with his men for probably a total of like 2 minutes around Moby Dick before he very much almost got eaten. Their second encounter with Moby Dick went just as terribly as the first one, if not arguably worse, actually. Almost eaten again. Ahab also lost his peg leg, ironically, and Fidala is nowhere to be seen, presumably drowned? Question mark. So now we're going into the last chapter, the last encounter with Moby Dick, the third and final, in whatever way it will end. And we'll see how this goes. Fidala turned up. If you know, you know. Well, whale. Sorry. We did it. We finished it. We finished it, and I'm sad. I'm sad I finished it. I miss it. I'm going to give you my rating for it. I'm going to explain my rating for it, and then I'm going to talk you through some notes I made on my thoughts on it. I honestly feel like I could write a whole dissertation on this book, to be honest. Like, it really reawoke my little English lit grad student. There's so much in here to be essayed on. So I'm going to give you like 5% of all of those things, because it can be read and read and read and read and read over and over again, and you could get something new out of it every time. I just gobbled it up. It gobbled me up. How many stars? How many whales? For me, 4 out of 5 whales. I was torn between a 4 and a 5, and I kind of still am flip-flopping between, but I'm going to explain why it's a 4 but also a 5. The only reason why I would maybe give it a 4 rather than hoiking it all the way up to the 5 is just because of the sheer volume and mass and quantity of the setology and the whale biology history lesson essentially in it, which was really interesting to read, like one off, but it also wasn't necessarily relative to the narrative. On a reread, I would probably try and pick up an abridged version that didn't have all of the sort of like whale academia. Other than that, I would give it a 5 stars, truly. But I just feel like Melville just really found a special interest in whales and just needed to share that with the world alongside this story. He's just clearly so fascinated with whales. That was the only thing for me that I was like, on a reread, I would either skip over those bits or I would find an abridged version, because the entire rest of the book I just genuinely absolutely fell like head over heels in love with. There was not a single word wasted. I thought he had such an incredible mastery of language and such an incredible way of painting a picture and pulling you in. And also, he's so funny. This voice is hilarious. He's so sardonic and witty and timeless in his sort of expression of what it is to be human and all of the sort of woes and joy and grumpiness and meditativeness and pensiveness and overwhelmedness that comes with life and being human. It's just also encapsulated in here, and it's just so beautiful. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm gonna move on to actually my notes, because I'm running away with it already. I need to slow down and actually be concise. So, narrative voice. Let me talk about the narrative voice. Ishmael is such a interesting character to sort of go along the journey with. The whole reason he takes to the sea is because he just gets frustrated with being a human and gets frustrated with other humans. He talks, I think, about taking to the sea whenever he just feels like he needs to knock someone's hat off. And he's like, yeah, I'm feeling the impulse to punch that man in the face, so I should probably go get on a boat. And that's a philosophy I can live by. But what's interesting is that the more you go into the story with him, and particularly once Captain Ahab is introduced, it becomes less of a point of view from Ishmael and more of a sort of weird, somehow omnipresent point of view that doesn't actually make sense given the fact that it's Ishmael who is established as the narrative voice. But it's clever because, and this is the clever thing, right? It's clever because it felt to me that was actually indicative of, once Captain Ahab steps foot out of his captain's quarters, which he's been hiding in for the first like however long, his sort of point of view takes over, and we start getting sort of Captain Ahab's point of view and soliloquies from different characters who are on their own in different rooms. We don't even know where Ishmael is at this point, even though it's his narrative voice, but it's really not, because it just suddenly becomes an omnipresent sort of third person narrative essentially. But it's such a seamless sort of transition into it that it still feels like it's Ishmael talking to you, because it is, because the narrative brings you back to awareness of that at points. But it's also not, because you're just sort of sat with Captain Ahab alone in his cabin, and he's having this sort of mad soliloquy to himself. Ishmael's not there. Where is Ishmael? Where are we? Who knows? But this to me feels like the meshing of Captain Ahab's psyche oozing out into the rest of the crew, and you're all becoming this hive mind of Captain Ahab, because once he has announced the mission, it's impossible for anyone else on the ship to say no. Hey, you're already off, you're already on a 3-year journey together, so and Captain Ahab's the captain, what are you going to do, usurp him? Starbuck thought about it. And then also his madness becomes so vivid, I don't know another word, it becomes so vivid and so energized, that it just sort of seeps into everyone else, and everyone becomes this hive mind. So I feel like that's what's happening with the narrative voice. And then also the formatting of the thing just becomes so Shakespearean. Melville was actually really interested in Shakespeare and was like restudying his works. And you can really see and feel the impact of this. It literally, there's chapters that are written out like plays, literally an entire chapter written out like a play, and there are stage directions, and like at the beginning of certain chapters there's stage directions that's literally like enter Ahab. And then this also transgresses into the actual themes as well, the tragedy and the insanity and the ghostliness. I couldn't stop thinking of Hamlet, this white ghost being introduced at the beginning as this sort of prophecy slash siren like thing, saying come this way, come this way, come this way, you have to come this way, your life depends on it, your entire being depends on it, and luring this character through into their tragic narrative, which ends in insanity and death. There's literally an entire chapter also where Melville goes on about how terrifying the symbolism of whiteness is in creatures and ghosts and art and literature and symbology through history, how terrifying whiteness is, and this idea of this deathly ghost being this omen that is just set to deliver you into hell. Loved Queequeg, loved the bromance at the beginning, wished that we would have had more of Queequeg and Ishmael's bromance as the rest of the journey went on. Queequeg kind of gets lost in the rest of the crew once the main sort of quest continues. And again, it's just because like Ahab's experience becomes the main thing, which makes sense, and that is gripping enough. But I did also wish that we maybe would have had more of Queequeg and Ishmael, because I just loved Queequeg so much. This entire book basically just feels like a commentary on the human male ego and the inability to accept how minuscule we are as humans, and how powerless we are, and how we really don't matter in the grand scheme of Mother Nature and the universe. Ahab makes it his life and death's mission to conquer that, which is obviously an impossible task. The easiest path would be to just accept that, but that's also sort of the hardest thing ever as humans, because we're too conscious for our own good. And it's that sort of cycle that just sends Ahab slowly, not slowly at all, very fast, to insanity. Melville is directly sort of critiquing this Achilles heel that human nature has. And then he's also talking about eye for an eye. Right. Here's the thing. This is a revenge novel. However, Ahab is just wrong. He's just cracked, man. The entire reason why Ahab is on this whole scheme in the first place is because he lost his leg to Moby Dick. Moby Dick bit his leg off. Moby Dick bit his leg off because Ahab tried to kill him. Moby Dick bit his leg off and then swam away. Ahab then took that so deeply personally and decided to victimize himself that then his entire existence in the world becomes this one monomaniacal thought to get revenge on this whale who actually just bit back and then swam away. He swam the hell away after that. Ahab was lucky that all he took was his leg in the first place. And again, that's on the male ego. I'm sorry to say it. That's on the male ego. Yeah, okay, human ego, yes, okay, but really? And really, this entire thing is just two angry old men just sort of having a war with each other. You got angry old man Ahab, one side of the coin, and then you got angry old man Moby Dick, other side of the coin. because he's sort of notoriously known as also like this patriarch of the sea and this patriarch of all the whales. He's the biggest whale out there. It's talked about how he's probably like 100 years old at this point as well. So he's like the real patriarch of the sea. He seems to be honest, just protecting himself and the other whales. Seems like kind of a good guy. I'm team Moby Dick, to be honest. I'm team all the whales. That was the other thing. I was worried going into this book actually that I would find the whaling scenes quite hard because I get very affected by sort of anything to do with animals in film, TV, literature. I'm such an animal lover and I'm really sensitive to that sort of thing. So I was quite nervous. It was hard to read, especially because you know that this was a reality in history as well. This is a real thing. So that was quite upsetting to read, but it was worth it. If you can power through, it's worth it. I need to share with you some of my favorite quotes. Some of them specifically are around this particular symbolism that I just loved so much. There is so much symbolism throughout the book of Ahab being split, or this duality of him, or him just being basically completely cracked in the head. Obviously, he's split in terms of he has one leg that is human flesh and one leg that is made out of whale bone, one leg that is life itself, flesh and blood still pumping, and the other leg that is not only bone and death, but bone of the very thing that he is putting his entire meaning of existence on. So you've got an immediate duality there. And there's one quote that actually sums it up that I just read and nearly launched my book across the field because it was just so good. I was like, how dare you have the audacity to write such a good line? And had you watched Ahab's face that night, you would have thought that in him also two different things were warring. While his one live leg made lively echoes along the deck, every stroke of his dead limb sounded like a coffin tap. On life and death, this old man walked. On life and death, this old man walked. Are you joking? It just like entirely summed it up. It was, it knocked me. It knocked me when I read that. So there's that. He also has this scar that goes straight down the center of his face and neck. We don't know where it comes from. Like, it's never actually explained. It's sort of a mystery. Maybe he could have been born with it. Maybe he got it in a whaling accident another time. Maybe it was from something else. We don't actually know. But it's there and it's visible and it's just straight down the middle. And again, it's just this sort of everything about him is just like, is cracked. I don't know how else to say it. Along with that, there's constant themes of this idea of, again, this monomaniac thought, this monomaniac impulse that is sort of propelling Ahab through everything at this point. And there's so many moments where it talks about this thought or this energy from him pulsing inside of him, ready to crack open and burst open at any moment. There's one moment where Stubb says to someone else, like, look, there's a chick in him that's going to crack through any moment now. And it is this pulse, 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 pulse of this insanity that he can't leave it alone. And then there's another bit in one of the soliloquies as well, where he talks about having this iron crown, which made sense to me later. I was like, why an iron crown? And then I realized that all of the harpoons are made out of iron. And I was like, there it is. I, the wearer, see not its far flashings, but darkly feel that I wear that dazzlingly confounds. 'Tis iron, that I know, not gold. 'Tis split, too, that I feel. The jagged edge galls me so my brain seems to beat against the solid metal. Dude's about to have a stroke, he's so stressed. Also, like, come on, a cracked crown, warring to be the ultimate patriarch of the land and sea, a cracked crown, insanity, a war for the crown. Come on. The symbology just, it strikes me down. There's so much brow imagery as well. It describes how, like, Ahab's map of the sea is covered in these deep, deep wrinkles from where he's been scoring where things go. And then you look at his brow and it has the exact same wrinkles. And it's just this transference of his entire psyche and his entire madness around this freaking whale that is just projected back to him in every crevice of his environment. It's just incredible. While thus employed, the heavy pewter lamp suspended in chains over his head continually rocked with the motion of the ship, and forever threw shifting gleams and shadows of lines upon his wrinkled brow, till it almost seemed that while he himself was marking out lines and courses on the wrinkled charts, some invisible pencil was also tracing lines and courses upon the deeply marked chart of his forehead. more of the cracked symbology, like cracked symbology, severing in half symbology, things cracking out of a skull symbology, lightning striking symbology as well. You've got the scar that feels like lightning. There's so much lightning later, and also sort of as an omen before they finally encounter Moby Dick, lightning ends up striking the ship and setting the three masts on fire. And instead of like sane, logical shipmen who would sort of see the masts of their very ship burning down before them and go, maybe we should just port. Maybe we should just take a step back from this and recharge for a second. Ahab's like, "'Tis a good omen. It's time." Got more cracked, soul splitting, psyche splitting stuff here. Literally, like almost an entire paragraph. He's like Jekyll and hiding it the whole time. It's like he's literally this monomaniacal thought is taking over his sort of conscious, logical human brain. And there's times where you can feel him warring with it, but losing. But as the mind does not exist unless leagued with the soul, therefore it must have been that in Ahab's case, yielding up all his thoughts and fancies to his one supreme purpose, that purpose, by its own sheer inveteracy of will, forced itself against gods and devils into a kind of self-assumed, independent thing of its own. My final quote that I've pulled, again, just sort of summed it up really. Yeah, in this final plea from Starbuck, who is sort of the one crewmate who has sort of logic and a sense of caution around things, all the other crewmen either sort of don't care and are just here for the adventure, or are kind of swept up in Ahab's madness. Starbuck is the only one who sort of tries to appeal to his sanity, wherever it may be, at several points along. And his final appeal to him, he says, "I ask thee not to be aware of Starbuck, thou wouldst but laugh, but let Ahab be aware of Ahab. Beware of thyself, old man. Beware of thyself, old man." Spoiler alert, he wasn't. What a ride of a book. To summarize, there was just so much musing on madness and ego and the philosophy of what it is to be alive. It's such a philosophical book. Overall, my time with Moby Dick was absolutely wonderful. We'll definitely be doing a reread at some point in the future, because I just feel like one reread isn't enough to get everything that there is in there. Team Moby Dick, what a guy. Anyway, that's everything for this vlog. I hope you enjoyed coming along with me, and I look forward to the next one. We'll see what book it's going to be next. I have started reading If We Were Villains. Whoa. And I've just lost my page in it. Because I read The Secret History, Donna Tartt, absolutely freaking devoured that, obviously, and knew that I needed to get around to If We Were Villains as well at some point, because I am, if you couldn't tell by the Moby Dick Shakespeare tangent, I also freaking love Shakespeare. So obviously this is going to be right up my street, and I'm very much enjoying it already. But we'll see what the next read will be for the next video and where that takes us. Or it might be an acting video, it might be an art video. Oh, that's also something. I did some Moby Dick art. I drew a whale and I drew some fish. So that's also a baby step forwards. Okay, thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you on the next one.